Hi, my name's Barry Scott. I'm 32 years old, 6 feet tall, and weigh 200 pounds. I am married to Linda, a beautiful 32-year-old redhead. We've been married for 4 years and are very happy. We met at a party given by her best friend Claire to celebrate her engagement to my best friend Larry. I first saw her across the room and just knew we were meant to be together. I asked her for a dance, and we danced together all night. At the end of the party, I asked her for a date, and she agreed. We dated for 6 months and got married. Larry was my best man and Claire was her matron of honor. Life looked good. At the time, I had just finished my service in the Army as a ranger with the Special Operations Group. I had yet to decide what I wanted to do next when Colonel Scott approached me. He wanted to recruit me for a Special Operations unit out of Langley. I was interested, so we continued the conversation. I had received honors for my time in the military, but I didn't consider myself a hero. I was simply determined to survive. In this new role, I would be the point person for dangerous missions, while the rest of the team would support me. They would handle logistics, fake documentation, transportation, and extraction. I would carry out the mission using the equipment given to me. I would receive instructions on whether to make a public statement or make the target's death look like an accident. My civilian cover was as a security consultant to the government, and I had a substantial salary. Whenever I went on a consultation, which was often, I received an extra $250,000 in danger money. This money would be deposited into a Swiss bank account that I kept details of in a security box at an independent bank located 200 miles away. In the meantime, I started day trading and built up a significant savings for our future family. As I mentioned, we were happy, and money was not an issue. Linda worked as a personal assistant to Albert Wise, the sales team manager at an advertisement agency. Albert was a kind old man looking forward to his retirement together with his wife of 30 years. Linda would sometimes work late and accompany Albert to sales meetings across the country. I didn't mind, as I also had work obligations that took me away for extended periods of time. Trouble began when Albert retired and a new head of sales, Clive West, was hired. This happened in September, and for the next 3 months, Linda couldn't stop talking about Clive. She would mention him constantly and talk about how much she was learning from him. When I jokingly said that Clive must be capable of miracles, she stopped talking about him. At that time, I didn't think much of it. I trusted Linda completely and knew she would never betray me. I was, however, excited about attending Linda's company's annual Christmas party to finally meet this Mr. Wonderful. The party was scheduled for the week before Christmas, and Linda was really looking forward to it. She had chosen a stunning emerald green dress, along with new shoes and jewelry that I had given her as an anniversary gift. She looked absolutely breathtaking. I made a comment about her outfit to which she blushingly replied that she wanted to look her best for her loving husband. I smiled and asked who that would be, teasingly. She answered, "You, silly." Who else? We left for the party, and upon arrival, we were seated at a table just for the two of us. This was unusual, as we usually sat with her colleagues and friends, with whom I would chat while Linda mingled with the crowd. Dinner was good, although not exceptional, and towards the end of the evening, Linda left the table. I watched as she walked over to a tall, handsome man named Clive, dressed in an expensive suit. He was about 5 years older than us. Linda touched his arm to get his attention and then pointed towards me. They both walked over to our table. "Barry, this is my boss, Clive." "Clive, this is my husband, Barry," Linda introduced us. I stood up and shook Clive's hand. He tried to exert force with his handshake, but I matched it, causing him to retract his hand quickly. "You've got a strong grip there, Barry," he commented. "You too, Clive. How are you finding your time at Benson so far?" I asked, trying to maintain a friendly demeanor. "I'm getting the hang of it, thanks to your beautiful wife. I'm hoping to work closely with Linda in the future," he responded with a smug expression on his face, clearly indicating his intentions towards my wife. I looked at Linda, who avoided eye contact. It was time to address the situation. "Linda," I called her name firmly. "What?" she replied, looking at me with confusion. "Linda, that's her name, not Lynn. The last time I called her Lynn, she didn't talk to me for 2 days. Please use her real name." "Oh, of course." Sorry, no offense, she quickly apologized. None taken. If there had been offense, you would have known, I replied, trying to keep my composure. Linda blushed and turned to Clive, saying it was time to mingle with other guests. She gave me a furious look and walked away. I was used to Linda making rounds at these parties, wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. It usually took about an hour, during which I would chat with her colleagues at our table. As I looked around for a familiar face, I noticed that everyone avoided making eye contact. This felt unsettling. I sat alone, watching Linda and Clive move from one group to another. Every time they stopped, Clive would inch closer to Linda and place his hand on her back, eventually resting it on her hip. It angered me, especially because Linda didn't do or say anything about it. To any onlooker, they looked like a couple on a date. I decided to record their interactions for a few minutes, knowing that I needed to make a decision. I had been alone for over 2 hours. Should I create a scene or just leave? I chose to leave. I left a note for Linda, telling her that she didn't need my presence and that I had gone home. I advised her to take a cab back. The note lacked the affectionate words that it usually contained. 20 minutes later, I arrived home, and I still hadn't received any word from Linda. I turned off my phone, went to bed, and fell asleep almost immediately. I was awakened when Linda opened the bedroom door and turned on the light. I checked the clock and realized that I had been home for 2 hours before she noticed. What was that all about? You embarrassed me in front of my boss and then left me to find my way home. What the hell is wrong with you? She demanded. Not tonight. We'll talk in the morning, I responded calmly. Oh no, we'll talk right now. I picked up my phone and showed her the clips I had recorded of her and Clive. You left me alone for over 2 hours while you and Clive paraded around the room like a couple. No one would meet my eyes, they were too embarrassed. If you don't believe me, just watch this. I played the clips, and Linda sat down frowning. While she was absorbed in watching, I went to the guest room and locked the door. Shortly afterward, she knocked on the door and called out for me to open it. Barry, I'm so sorry. I can see why you're upset. I didn't mean to hurt you. Nothing is going on between me and Clive, I swear. Please open the door, she pleaded. We'll see each other at breakfast. Good night, I responded firmly. The next morning, I got up, went about my routine, and took a shower. As I descended the stairs, I noticed the smell of cooking. Linda had prepared one of my favorite breakfast waffles with bacon and eggs. Coffee was already on the table, and she was just finishing up the meal. I thanked her for breakfast and started eating. Once I finished, Linda started the conversation. I'm really sorry. After watching those clips, I realized how we appeared to everyone. I didn't realize the impact it was having on you. But I swear, Barry, there's nothing going on between me and Clive. Please believe me. I believe you, Linda, but you must distance yourself from him. He practically admitted his intentions to seduce you. He's a predator, and you're his target, and he doesn't care who knows. And why does he get to call you Lynn when I got reprimanded for doing the same thing? He's my boss, so he can call me whatever he likes. I don't like it, but what can I do? And about him wanting to seduce me, you're wrong. He has always been a gentleman. Linda, he's manipulating you. He started by gradually invading your personal space, getting you used to his touch. You didn't even notice when his touches became longer until he put his hand on your hip. To any casual observer, this seemed normal to you. Am I right? Linda looked at me with tears in her eyes and nodded. I sat and looked at my wife for a few minutes. You have to understand there are manipulative people out there who specialize in seducing married women. They enjoy making the husband feel inadequate, and Clive is one of them. His next move will be to ask you to lunch and sit next to you to give him an excuse to accidentally touch you. He'll reach for the salt or perhaps the water jug and brush against your chest. Of course, he'll be apologetic, but it will happen again. The next step will be going out for a celebratory lunch with wine to lower your resistance, after which there will be a friendly peck on the cheek, and he'll hold your hand while walking back to the car. You might not resist because he's your boss, and what's the harm? He'll continue to give you compliments and find any excuse to initiate physical contact until he thinks you've accepted this as normal, just like you did at the party. The next step is he'll start asking you about me and when I'm away, saying things like, if you were mine, I would never leave you alone. Or, I think he's taking you for granted. Or do you think he's being unfaithful while he's away? You should check his emails. One day when he knows I'm not around, he'll ask you to dinner and suggest you not tell me as I might get the wrong idea, just to talk about your promotion, or to discuss a mistake you've made on a project. You might accept, hoping for the next step in your career or wondering what you've done wrong. The next time he takes you to dinner, it will be at a venue with dancing. He'll dance with everyone, but mostly with you. This will give him a chance for more physical contact and will seem normal, especially if he dances all the slow songs with you. So from lunch to dinner and dancing, these activities will become a regular occurrence. His next step is to take you to dinner at a restaurant with a dance floor in a hotel he's coming close to achieving his goal. After taking you there a few times to get you comfortable, he'll make a move. He'll find an opportunity to hug you, and if you resist, he will apologize profusely, saying something like, "I'm so sorry. It's just that you're so beautiful I couldn't resist. Please forgive me," and of course you will. The next time, he might try when you've had a little too much to drink, or even put something in your drink to lower your inhibitions. Before you know it, you'll be in a compromising situation with him, wondering how it happened. I'm willing to bet he will have won you over by this time next year if you stay as his PA. I looked at Linda, she was now crying, and tears were dripping off of her chin. You can't be serious. You know I will never betray you. I'm more than capable of handling Carl if he tries anything like that. I'm disappointed that you think so little of me that I might fall for his lies. I'm not some naive person who easily falls victim to manipulation. Linda, I meant no disrespect and I trust you completely, but manipulators like him know how to break your defenses. To him, you're just another conquest. Look how easily he came between us tonight. This is our first major fight since we met. Doesn't that tell you something? Okay, maybe you have a point, but I promise you, if he tries anything like you described, I'll shut him down and report him to HR. Are you satisfied now? Not really. If you love me as much as you say you do and you value our marriage, you should consider finding a new job tomorrow. I love you more than anything, but I won't let a manipulative person like him drive me away from the job I enjoy. You said earlier that you'd be willing to bet on the outcome, so I'm taking that bet. If he hasn't made any advances on me by the next Christmas party, you'll buy me that car I've always wanted. And if he has, you can choose whatever you want. I'm that confident that it won't happen. All right, I'll think of something. I dropped the subject after that, and life went on as usual. We went to work, socialized with friends, and got close several times a week. About 2 months later, I brought up the topic again. Linda, it's been 2 months since we talked about Carl. Has he asked you to lunch yet? Linda looked a bit uneasy, like she was trying to avoid answering, which worried me about our marriage. I knew he had asked, but had she accepted? I'm not telling you anything until you tell me what you want, if I lose our bet. I could tell she was evading the question, so I started to feel anxious about our relationship. I thought about the situation, and the more I thought about it, the more convinced I was that I was right. I decided to protect myself financially, so I had my attorney draw up a legal agreement. If she cheated, she would only be entitled to her personal belongings and the money in her account. That night, when she came home from dinner, I presented the agreement to her. What's this? You asked me to decide what I wanted if you lost our bet. This is a legal agreement. If you cheat on me by the Christmas party, you will only be entitled to your personal belongings and the money in your account. She looked at me in disbelief. Are you serious? I am very serious. Are you confident enough in your ability to resist Carl's advances that you will sign this document? Or have you started going to lunch with him, like I predicted? She grabbed the pen, signed where indicated, and threw it at me before storming into the bedroom and locking the door. At that moment, I think I realized that our marriage was over, even though she didn't seem to understand it yet. The following day, I gave the signed agreement to my attorney for safekeeping. I prayed that I would never have to use it because it would mean the end of our marriage. For the rest of the day, I couldn't concentrate, feeling sick to my stomach. I considered making Carl disappear, but then I thought that Linda needed to face this test if we were to have a future together. I needed to know for sure if she was the right person to be the mother of our children. I decided to let things unfold naturally. It was now September, and Linda and I hadn't discussed Carl since that night she locked me out of the bedroom. Things had returned to normal, until one day in late August when she seemed different. I returned from an assignment one afternoon, and Linda was still at work, so I started cooking dinner. When she came home, I could immediately tell that something was wrong, so I asked her about it. She brushed it off, saying it was just a work problem. She seemed on edge for the next couple of days but refused to talk about it. We usually got close when I returned, but she said she wasn't feeling well, so we didn't get close for the next 2 days. On Saturday, she seemed like her usual self, as if she had reached a decision, and the weekend went well. We got close on Saturday night and Sunday morning, but I could tell her heart wasn't fully in it. I decided to seek some assistance because I was confident that I would win the bet, but I would need proof for the divorce and the agreement. I contacted our team planner and explained what I needed. She agreed to follow Carl and Linda and had their cars, his office, and any rooms they used bugged. I was saddened by the impending end of my marriage, but appreciated the loyalty and support of the surveillance team. They insisted on not accepting any monetary reward, saying it was their pleasure to help me. They reassured me that if I needed further assistance, they would be there. On the 15th of November, they handed me a folder with the surveillance report, and they advised me. If there is any hope for reconciliation, do not look at all the pictures, just watch the first video. It should be enough for a divorce. The rest is not admissible in court. However, please listen to the conversation, it might help you heal. I followed their advice and only watched the first video. It showed Linda and Carl walking down a hotel corridor. Linda opened the door, and they entered, and the footage was blank until the following morning when Carl left the room with a smug grin on his face. My marriage was over. I didn't need to listen to the rest of the conversations on the other discs. One video was enough. The night of the Christmas party. I waited at the bottom of the stairs just like last year, but this time I was dressed casually. About 6 weeks earlier, Linda had gone to a sales conference with the entire team, and when she returned, she was a changed person. There was no intimacy, no loving embraces. She seemed completely distracted and emotionally distant. I realized then that she had given in to Carl's advances. It saddened me, but I could no longer be intimate with her. I made up an excuse, saying I had a medical condition that prevented any activity. I told her I was in a lot of pain, so I wouldn't be able to attend the Christmas party. Since she had recently been promoted to assistant sales manager, she would have to go alone. She came down the stairs, and I was surprised to see that she didn't put in the same effort to impress as she did last year. She wore a simple cocktail dress, comfortable shoes, and minimal jewelry. If it weren't for the dress, she could have been dressed for work. I was shocked by the change. She walked over to me and gave me a quick peck on the cheek. I'm off now. I won't be out too late, and I'll have a lot to tell you after tonight. With that, she opened the door and left for the party. Earlier in the day, I visited my attorney and picked up the necessary paperwork for divorce, as well as lawsuits against Carl for alienation of affection and failure to implement company policy regarding harassment. I also visited the surveillance team to thank them for their help. They refused any monetary reward, insisting that it was their pleasure to assist me. I was moved by their loyalty and expressed my deepest gratitude. They handed me 3 other folders, revealing that Carl had seduced 2 other women in the sales team and the CEO's personal assistant. I knew my marriage was over, and it was time to move on. Back home, I gathered all the evidence and legal documents in my briefcase and dressed in formal attire with a tie. I headed to the party, picking up the court server on the way. I gave her money for the cab ride home, and I also asked her to give the folders to the woman's husband. We arrived at the party, which was in full swing. I showed my invitation and was allowed inside with the court server. We sat at a table in a corner, and nobody seemed to notice us as I pointed out the various people whose lives were about to change. When I saw Linda, she was talking animatedly with a person, and he didn't seem too happy. During a slow dance, I took the opportunity to make my move. I approached the band leader and requested to make an announcement. He paused the band and handed me the microphone. I tapped the microphone to grab everyone's attention. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all having a great time. I won't keep you long, but I have a few early Christmas presents to give out. I nodded to the server, and she walked over to Linda and Clive. Linda looked shocked and had a surprised expression on her face. The server handed Linda the first package, then turned to Clive and gave him his. She continued to deliver packages to the husbands who had been cheated on. Finally, she came towards me where Mr. Benson was trying to get my attention. She walked up to him and said those dreaded words. "Are you Mr. Walter Benson?" "Yes, Mr. Benson, you have been served." With a smile, she left the venue. The room fell silent. Instead of cheers and applause, there were various responses. "How could you? You dishonest person." "Oh my goodness, why?" Several betrayed husbands expressed their shock and disappointment. There were even sounds of slaps given to cheating wives. Clive, fearing for his safety, quickly left the party. Linda was still looking at me as she opened her envelope. She looked at the photos, burst into tears, and collapsed to the ground sobbing. The first photo showed a car with a red cross over it, along with a note saying "I win." The second photo depicted her letting Clive into her room, and the third showed him leaving the next morning. Finally, Mr. Benson got my attention. Old man Benson was a religious man with traditional values. "What is all this about, young man?" I guided him to a quiet table and explained the situation, emphasizing that he was held responsible since Clive first started his inappropriate behavior in a hotel room paid for by the company. Therefore, it was considered company property. Clive continued his actions by having affairs with other women in his office, blackmailing them into the relationships. I also informed him that everyone in the company, including the CEO, knew about the affairs but did nothing to stop them. As a matter of fact, the CEO only found out about his wife's affair tonight. Karma can be harsh. Mr. Benson's face turned red like a tomato, and he seemed close to having a heart attack. He stood up and approached the microphone. "May I have your attention, please?" The room quieted down, except for the sounds of sobbing from women whose lives had just been shattered. It has come to my attention that certain members of this company have been engaging in inappropriate activities on company premises. You know who you are, and you will need to report to HR for disciplinary action on Monday morning. Mr. Clive West, if you are still here, you are terminated without any bonuses or references. As for the rest of you, saying that I am disappointed would be an understatement. Many of you knew what was happening and did nothing. You could have saved 4 marriages, but instead, you gossiped without taking any action. I always considered us a work family, but you have shown me how wrong I was. Therefore, until further notice, all social functions are canceled while I investigate this matter. Ray, as the CEO, you should have stopped Clive's inappropriate behavior as soon as you found out. The fact that you also suffered is no excuse. You are demoted to company manager, and I will resume the position of CEO. Please see me on Monday morning. And to all the affected husbands, please come and see me so that we can work out some compensation. I suggest you all come together and hire a single attorney to represent you. Now, before I end, I need to apologize to Mr. Scott in person and assess the extent of the damage. Good night, everyone. The party is over. Please leave. Everyone started making their way towards the exit with stern looks at the unfaithful wives. Ralph Benson came and sat next to me, taking my hand. "I'm sorry, son. I truly am. There's an all-night cafe across the road. How about you and I grab a coffee and see what we can work out?" "That sounds good to me, but I need to talk to my soon-to-be ex-wife first." "All right, Barry. See you at the cafe in a few minutes then." I approached Linda, who was sitting alone, softly crying. When she looked up as I approached her, her tears were flowing. "I am so sorry, baby. I made a terrible mistake. Can we move past this and start over?" "I'm sorry, Linda, but that ship has sailed. You had your chance and you blew it. I will be away for a few weeks, so I want you out of the house before I return. Here's the name and address of my attorney. According to the postnup you signed, you will leave with only your clothes and anything you brought into the marriage. However, you can keep your jewelry and the money in your own account. All other accounts and credit cards are blocked. You came into the marriage with $3,000 in your account, and my attorney has a check for that amount for you to collect. The lease on your car expires in a couple of months, as does your insurance. You can decide whether to continue or cancel them. It's up to you. Please, Barry, I made a mistake. Things got out of control, and I didn't intend for this to happen. Do you remember our conversation last Christmas when I warned you about what would happen if you stayed as his assistant? I know you do, so no need to answer. You told me you weren't naive and that you could handle him. You refused to leave your job because you wanted that promotion. Well, you did get the promotion, but look at what it cost you, cost us. Was it worth it? She broke down crying once again as I turned and walked away. I went to meet Ralph, and despite everything, I still loved her and had an idea in mind. When I entered the cafe, I noticed that Ralph had already ordered. He must be quite perceptive. I took a sip of the coffee, which was perfect. Strong and black with 2 sugars. How did you know? Barry, I've worked in sales my entire life. I can read people like a book. As for your coffee, you struck me as someone who would enjoy a strong cup. I took a chance with the sugar. Did I guess right? Spot on. Look, I have a flight in just over an hour, so I'll get straight to the point. Are you considering firing all those wives? It has crossed my mind. I don't condone cheating. Can we make a deal? If I drop my lawsuit, would you consider keeping Linda on and promoting her to Clive's old position? She has been working as his assistant for 3 years and has repeatedly told me that she could do a better job than him. Do you still love her, despite what she did to you? I can't help it. I still love her, and I just can't live with her knowing what she did. Do we have a deal? Against my better judgment, yes, we have a deal. But if she can't deliver, she will be let go, okay? That sounds fair. Thank you. I finished my coffee, got up, and prepared to leave. Barry, if you ever need a job, come and see me. I have 2 other branches, and I'm always looking for talented individuals. I smiled, nodded, shook his hand, and left. In a different time and place, we might have been friends. I boarded my flight to England and arrived at Heathrow Airport 13 hours later. I took a taxi to the Dorchester Hotel and settled into my luxurious suite. The next morning, I woke up late and called room service to order a traditional English breakfast. I had always wanted to try it during my visit to the UK. When it arrived, it seemed like a heart attack waiting to happen. Everything on the plate was unhealthy except for the eggs. I cautiously took a bite of each item and found them all delicious. I devoured the whole thing, along with 2 cups of what the English called coffee. While in England, I wanted to explore and experience everything, and the hotel doorman kindly helped me plan my day, ensuring I avoided tourist traps. On my last day, I called my team and asked them to arrange a meeting with Clive West. It was finally time for my revenge. As I left the hotel for the final time, I gave a generous tip to Tom, the doorman, and said my goodbyes. I had thoroughly enjoyed my time in England and promised myself I would return someday. The following day, I arrived back home and entered my house. It no longer felt like a home to me. Instead, it felt empty and cold. It hit me how much I missed Linda. While unpacking, I noticed that all of Linda's belongings were gone. I felt a hollow feeling inside at her absence. I went out for a bite to eat and a few beers, and after 1 too many drinks, I was assisted into a cab and driven home. I woke up late the next morning, realizing it was Sunday, and that there wasn't much I could do until Monday. After collecting my car, I took care of some yard work and watered the flower boxes. I wondered who had been doing it while I was away. As I was bagging the cut grass, my neighbor came out. I asked him if he had been watering the flowers, and he replied that Linda had come over multiple times to tend to them. I was surprised. Why would she do that? On Monday, I called my attorney and scheduled an appointment for later in the afternoon. Linda, after the first Christmas party, when I introduced Clive to Barry, I noticed a tension between them. I saw the rivalry between them as they shook hands, which Barry won easily. The interaction between them was unfriendly, and I was worried Barry might cause a scene, so I guided Clive away to meet other people. I got so caught up in socializing that I didn't realize the time. I looked over and saw that Barry was no longer at our table, so I went searching for him. When I couldn't find him anywhere, I approached one of the husbands he usually talked to and asked if he knew where Barry was. He went home. I saw him grab his coat and leave. I was furious. Did he say why? He didn't need to. You left him alone for over 3 hours. I guess he realized he wasn't needed. I did see him put a note in your purse. Have you read it yet? I walked over to our table, retrieved my purse, and took out the note. The note, you don't need me, so I've gone home. It was signed Barry, not Love Barry as he usually signs. My anger increased. I checked my watch and realized I had been at the party for over 3.5 hours, leaving my husband alone. No wonder he was upset. I grabbed my purse to go home, then realized I had no money and hadn't brought any of my cards. I wondered how I was going to get home. I opened my purse to find my cloakroom ticket and discovered two $20 bills. Barry had thought of everything. When I got home, Barry was already in bed. I started shouting at him, embarrassed about what had happened. He just sat there calmly and said we would talk in the morning. I insisted that we talk immediately. He explained how I had unknowingly fallen into Clive's trap and what Clive hoped to achieve. At first I was shocked, but then it all made sense. Barry was right about everything. But when Barry asked me to leave Benson's, I became angry and told him I would never betray his trust. I wasn't naive, I could take care of myself. He even went as far as betting that I would cheat by next Christmas if I didn't leave Benson's. I knew I would never cheat on Barry, I would rather go to extremes. So I accepted his bet and asked for a new car if he lost. I also asked what he wanted if he won. He said he would think about it. For the next 2 months, everything happened as Barry had predicted. Clive took every opportunity to be near me, but I was prepared. He had dangled the promotion to sales manager in front of me since Kim would be leaving at the end of the year. We had gone out to lunch a few times to discuss work-related matters that could have been dealt with at the office. Yes, he touched me innocently as much as possible, but I was onto his game and smiled internally each time. He started asking me questions about Barry's work and when he would be away, just as Barry warned. He even held my hand a couple of times and, when I didn't object, started stroking it. I would politely pull my hand away, and he would apologize, saying he didn't realize what he was doing. Around that time, Barry brought home an envelope from his attorney and asked me to sign it, claiming it was a prenup that he would enforce in the event of my unfaithfulness. I signed it without even reading it, trusting that he wouldn't need it. We were solid. As part of the sales team, we had to visit an important client to make a pitch, and we would be away for 3 days. When the client signed the contract, Clive suggested we celebrate, and we all went to dinner. Except for Kim, who wanted to go home early. We had dinner at the hotel, and Clive recommended having a drink at the bar. We all agreed, but when we got there, there were no available seats. So we sat at a table, and Clive ordered drinks. As we sat there, a band set up and started playing, so we all had a few dances. After 3 drinks, I usually only have 2. Clive and I were dancing a slow song when he unexpectedly hugged me. I initially responded for a couple of seconds, but then I slapped his face and walked away. He came running after me, apologizing and explaining that he had too much to drink and thought I looked beautiful. It was exactly like something Barry had warned me about, and I was so ashamed and angry at myself for almost falling for it. I felt incredibly guilty and blamed Barry for always being right. If I had consumed a few more drinks, I might have ended up in Clive's bed that night. The next morning, I left first thing and drove home. When I arrived, Barry must have noticed that something was wrong and asked if he could help. I shut him out and acted snarky throughout the day. I went to bed that night unsure of what to do about Clive, but sometime during the night, I had an epiphany. I decided to report Clive to HR on Monday and resign. Saturday morning, I felt as if a great weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I snuggled up to Barry, and we got close in desperation that I had never felt before. We got close again that night and the following morning. I'm sure Barry realized that our marriage had reached a turning point. On Monday, I went to work as usual, determined to end this charade and put Clive in his place. When I arrived, Clive was waiting for me and asked me to come into his office. "Linda, I'm so sorry about Thursday night. I had too much to drink and wasn't thinking clearly. I know you're angry with me right now, but please don't do anything rash. I talked to Mr. Benson and he's going to recommend you for the position of manager. But if you create a fuss now, the board won't be impressed and you might lose the job. I promise to stay away from you from now on if you give me a second chance." I thought about his proposal since I wanted that promotion. In the end, I agreed, and life went on. It was getting close to the annual company sales conference, and all 3 offices in the country would be attending. I was informed that my promotion would be announced during the conference. It was going to be held in the neighboring state for 2 days, with a company ball exclusively for the staff on the second night. It was meant to be a team-building event. We all drove there separately and checked into the hotel. I went down to dinner and found some of my colleagues, with whom I sat and enjoyed a nice meal followed by a few drinks. I was tired, so I went to bed early, knowing that the next day would be busy. I dressed in a business suit for the various meetings. The day went well, and during the final plenary meeting, awards were given out, and my promotion was announced amid applause. Afterward, I went to dinner and had a couple of glasses of wine to celebrate. Clive sat at the other end of the table, keeping his promise and not making any advances since our last conversation. After dinner, I changed into my cocktail dress for the year-end ball. As I entered the ballroom, I spotted my team and joined them. I was asked to dance by a couple of men from the other offices, and I accepted their invitations. They were all polite and maintained a respectful distance. Towards the end of the evening, Mr. Benson left and Clive immediately asked me to dance. Since I hadn't danced with him all night, I agreed. We remained on the dance floor for 2 dances, and I noticed that I was feeling a bit tipsy from the wine and 3 cocktails I had consumed. So when Clive insisted we have one last dance, I didn't object, even though it was a slow song. We moved across the floor with him holding me tightly. At the back of the dance floor, there was a large potted plant, and Clive guided me behind it and stopped. I looked up at him, and he leaned in to hug me. Instead of pushing him away, I pulled him closer. We remained like that until the song ended. I practically dragged Clive up to my room. Exhausted, I fell asleep. I woke up the next morning, confused about why I was lying on top of the bed. I screamed and rushed to the bathroom, noticing Clive lying next to where I had been with a smirk on his face. I cried uncontrollably for what I had done. Barry was right, Clive had seduced me by Christmas, and now my life was ruined. When I couldn't wash anymore, I returned to the bedroom. Clive was standing there, already dressed, with that same smirk on his face. Well, I finally got to be with little Miss Goody Two-Shoes. It took me almost a year, but it was worth it. You're quite attractive. I'm going to enjoy being with you from now on and relishing the fact that I'm being with another man's wife. You jerk. I'll never talk to you again. What did you give me, you meanie? Now let's be civil. We have a long and interesting relationship ahead. To answer your question, I slipped a little something into your drink, and you had a strong reaction. You were always the one I wanted, but you were so attached to your husband, it took me almost a year, and eventually I did it. Molly and Christine from our sales team fell for me within a couple of months, and it took almost 6 months for our CEO's wife, Lucci. Now, as for never seeing me again, just take a look at this. He showed me his phone, which had pictures of me unclothed on the bed, as well as an intimate one. I started to cry. Now, don't cry. Think of all the fun we'll have behind your husband's back. If you don't want me to send these pictures to darling Barry, just give me a little favor. I was sobbing as I performed. He looked at me and said, I'll let that one slide, but if it happens again, your husband will find out. Then he left the room, and I got home without even having breakfast. When I returned home, I couldn't meet Barry's gaze and wondered what would happen in the future. I was certain Barry would realize what I had done and divorce me. Barry made it easy for me to keep my distance. He told me he had a medical condition that prevented him from being close for a few weeks. As an erection was painful, he had to sleep in the guest room for now. This suited me fine because I couldn't bear the thought of being intimate with him again. I went to work on Monday as usual, and Clive was waiting for me. He called me into the office and locked the door. Okay, Linda, you know what I want. You're too uncomfortable for any encounter, so just do me a favor, and don't throw up like before. Then he told me to get back to work. As I left his office, I noticed Molly and Christine gave me a sympathetic look. I went to the restroom and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. That evening, Barry and I hardly spoke, and when he asked what was wrong, I made an excuse and went to bed. The same thing happened the next day and the day after. I was disgusted and ashamed of myself. After several attempts, he gave up and started being close with either Molly or Christine. I could hear them as I was near his office, and I thanked God it wasn't me. I still had to perform favors for him occasionally, and I despised him for that. I hadn't found a way out yet while still staying married. The morning of the Christmas party arrived, and Clive called me into his office. Well, you turned out to be a disappointment. Why couldn't you enjoy being close with me like those other women? We could have had a great time, but I won't let you off easily. On the first day back, I have some potential clients to meet at the Silver Dollar Hotel for dinner, and you're on the menu. I've already informed them about you, and they can't wait to have you after signing the contract. See you tonight. There was no way I was going to submit to this. Clive and his accomplices were in for a surprise. That night, Barry said he was still too uncomfortable to go to the party but told me to go anyway. Perfect. I could expose Clive and explain everything to Barry later. I knew my marriage was probably over, but I couldn't continue living like this. It was destroying me. I had lost weight due to being sick after every meal, and I hadn't slept well in over 6 weeks. I dressed casually for the event, and I'm sure Barry noticed something was off as he gave me a strange look when I left. I did notice that his goodbye was cold and distant. It felt like we would never see each other again. I arrived at the venue and socialized with other attendees. Many people avoided eye contact with me, aware of what had happened. Word had spread, and no one wanted to sit at my table, so I sat alone, fighting back tears. When Clive entered, he sought me out and sat next to me with a smug smile. I looked him right in the eyes and said, "Wipe that smile off your face. Your plans for Monday won't happen." After Mr. Benson gives his Christmas speech, I will expose everything you've done. I will name names and point fingers. My marriage may be over, but your career won't survive. And once Barry catches up to you, you'll regret it. Suddenly, the music stopped, and a voice I recognized too well started to unravel people's lives. It was my husband getting his revenge. Then, a woman approached me and asked if I was Linda Scott. When I confirmed, she handed me an envelope and said, "You have been served." She did the same to Clive. Then she walked over to the husbands of Molly and Christine and handed them each a package. She did the same to our CEO and then to Mr. Benson, standing next to Mr. Benson was my husband. I nearly fainted. I opened the envelope already knowing what was inside. It was divorce papers. But the first thing I saw was a picture of the Porsche I wanted, and he had marked a large red X on it with the caption, "I win." Then I found 2 more photos showing Clive entering and leaving my hotel room. I collapsed onto the floor, and 2 men came to help me into a chair. Molly and her husband were yelling at each other, and Christine was on the floor, holding her face, having obviously been hit. 2 men were restraining her husband as he cried like a baby. I couldn't see the CEO or his wife, so I wasn't sure what happened to them. Mr. Benson grabbed the microphone and announced that the party was over, and there would be strict consequences on Monday. Then he sat next to Barry, engaging in a conversation. After that, Mr. Benson left the room, and I didn't see him again. Barry stood in front of me, looking very upset. He told me he was going away and would be back in 3 weeks, expecting my stuff to be cleared out by then. He said a lot more, and I pleaded with him to take me back, but he just walked away. I dreaded going to work on Monday, but I showed up on time. A security guard was waiting to escort me to Mr. Benson's office. When he let us in, Mr. Benson dismissed the guard and offered me a seat. I sat down and noticed a box of tissues in front of me, so I pulled one out to wipe my eyes. "Well, young lady, you and others have made a mess of your marriages. If you had come to see me earlier, we could have resolved this differently. I would have dealt with West and compensated you. However, that didn't happen, and now we have to decide what to do. West has disappeared, and I doubt we'll see him again. I believe in fair treatment, so if you tell me everything, leaving nothing out, I'll base my decision on that. But be warned, I can detect a lie from a mile away. If you lie to me, you're done. Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out." I started from the first time I met Clive and told him the whole story, including the intimate parts. By the end, I was in tears and Mr. Benson handed me more tissues. "Thank you for being honest. It certainly opened my eyes. This goes beyond random infidelity. It was a well-planned and executed attack on your marriage and others. You held out the longest and had to be drugged. However, that doesn't excuse you from not coming to me afterward. It shows a lapse in your decision-making. Now, about your husband, he must truly love you. We had a conversation that night after I left, and we made a deal. He agreed to withdraw his claim, which would have been in the high 6-figure range. In return, I offered you Clive's former position, and he accepted. You are now the senior sales representative for Benson's. Congratulations. He extended his hand, and I shook it. Thank you. It's more than I deserve. I won't let you down, I promise. Don't thank me just yet. You have a lot of work ahead to rebuild the sales team. I will be firing Molly and Christine as they both played a role in destroying your marriage. And remember, I'll be keeping a close eye on you. If you don't deliver, you're out. I hope you understand. I understand, and you won't be disappointed. With that, I stood up and went to my new office. Barry had come through for me once again, and all I had done was cause him pain. Barry, I went to see my attorney as planned. She told me that Linda had visited her and collected the check and would sign the divorce papers on one condition. She wanted to meet with me for half an hour to try to explain what had happened. Sarah advised me to comply as otherwise Linda could drag the divorce out for at least a year. I asked Sarah to make the arrangements. That afternoon, I informed the firm the name the team called out non-existent agency and informed them what was happening and asked for some time off. They immediately agreed and put the team on standby for the foreseeable future. I contacted the team planner to arrange the meeting with Clive West. You see, Clive left the party and disappeared from sight. He moved to another state and got a job as marketing manager in a small printing firm. He had immediately started to make moves on the female staff and was out with one married woman at a diner. He had successfully managed to spike her drink and was looking forward to a night of fun as her husband was away working. When the couple went out to Clive's car, the team struck. Clive was tased and injected with a sedative, and the woman was rendered unconscious and dropped off at the local hospital. When Clive woke up, he realized he was hanging by his wrists. He looked around and saw he was hanging over a 45-gallon drum full of some kind of liquid. The first sound he heard was, "Boss, he's awake." 4 figures approached, all wearing ski masks. Just then, Clive's bladder gave way, and he wet himself. The 4 men chuckled, and one of them spoke. "Hi, Clive. I see your evening didn't go quite as you planned. Don't worry, the woman you were with is in the hospital with a headache, nothing more. I bet she has some explaining to do to her husband as to why she was dressed to go out and why she was in a diner with another man. So, it's not our problem. Anyway, you have much more to worry about. First, I bet you are wondering what's in the barrel. Let me tell you, it's a very nasty mixture of corrosives designed to dissolve a body in a matter of hours. But not yours, well, not yet anyway. Do you recognize my voice? No? Well, let me enlighten you." The man talking pulled off his mask. Clive thought, "Oh shoot, I'm screwed. It's Barry Scott. I'm sure you recognize me now, the man you betrayed by using his wife and then taking advantage of her." "Yes, I know she was willing, but that was because of the drug you gave her and then coerced her into having a relationship whenever you wanted. You achieved your goal, you ruined our marriage, but now you have to face the consequences. I understand that part of the thrill of your manipulation is the anticipation of the reward. Well, let's see how much thrill you get out of anticipating what you will suffer over the next 3 days. You are proud of your looks, so the first thing is to shave your head. You like to listen to women tell you about their lives and their husbands so that you can control them. So, I will take off one of your ears. You also like to look at their beauty, so I will take one of your eyes. You like to sweet-talk them into being with you, so I will cut half an inch off your tongue. You defiled my wife by hugging her. I held up a pair of rose pruners, and as I did, he soiled himself. We all had a good laugh at that. You danced with my wife, so I will remove your big toes and break one of your ankles. Let's see how good a dancer you are then. Finally, you had a relationship, so I will end you. Only after all this will you feel the pain I now feel because of you. You may be thinking of going to the police after this, but if you do, 2 things will happen. First, my friends will find you and lower you into this drum. You may not care, as your life is ruined anyway. They will also take your sister and your nieces to be relocated in Mexico. They pay a good price for blonde women, and even more for children. Of course, I was only bluffing. I would never harm a child, but he didn't know that. Tears were streaming down his face now, but I felt no satisfaction. So how do you like the anticipation so far? No answer. Cat got your tongue? We lifted him off the hook he was hanging by and strapped him in a chair. Over the next 3 days, I fulfilled my promises, and we left a broken man by the roadside, then called 911. The police interviewed me about his kidnapping, but I had proof that I was on a flight from England at the time. Clive never disclosed what had happened to him. He would only say he didn't remember anything after leaving the diner. The meeting, I sat in an empty office at Sarah's, waiting for Linda to arrive. Sarah was with me, and she said the whole meeting would be recorded for my safety. Linda was shown in. I could see she had gone to a lot of effort for this meeting. Her hair was freshly done, and she wore makeup and nice clothing. She looked stunning. She might have worn anything, but it didn't affect me. I had dressed casually to show my indifference. I opened the conversation. "Okay, Sarah, you wanted this meeting. What do you want?" "First, I want to say how sorry I am, and I didn't mean to hurt you. I was drugged the first time and couldn't control myself. After that, he blackmailed me into being with him. I finally realized I would never be free of him, and I was going to expose him for who he was at the Christmas party when you confronted him and ended everything. What you saw when you walked in was me telling him what I was planning to do. I know all that, but it doesn't excuse you from guilt. You had warnings about what he was doing, but you continued on anyway, hoping for your promotion. When he first tried to hug you, you should have ended it, but you didn't. You continued to see him behind my back until he drugged you and had encounter with you. Even then, you could have come to me, and I would have forgiven you. But instead, you handled it yourself, getting involved with him again over the next 6 weeks, not to mention the other things. I can't even look at you anymore. You're no longer someone I can be with, and if you're looking for reconciliation, forget it. You ruined it the first time you slept with him after he slept with you at the hotel. So are we done, or do I have to listen to more of your weak excuses?" Linda, crying, got up and rushed out of the room as I shouted, "Don't forget to sign the divorce papers on your way out." Linda moved in with her parents until she could find her own place. The house we had shared was part of my job's benefits, so I stayed there alone. One night, her mother called me. I had always had a good relationship with her parents, and they treated me like a son. Barry, Linda is a mess. All she does is work, barely eats, and spends all her time in her room crying. I'm afraid she might harm herself. Can't you forgive her? She knows it was all her fault, and I'm sure she would never do something so stupid again. Mom, I'm sorry it has come to this. I truly am. I'm just as heartbroken as she is, but there's no going back. She made her choices, and now she has to deal with the consequences. I still love her, and I can't turn that off. If it's any consolation, I can't sleep either. But every time I think of her, it feels like a stab in my heart. She hurt me deeply. I don't think I'll ever trust another woman again. I couldn't bear that pain once more. Please tell her I wish her well and that she should move on. Later that week, her father called me, and I expected more of the same, but he surprised me. "Hi, son. I know your mom called earlier this week. I just want you to know that I support your decision. If your mom had done something like that to me at your age, I would probably still be in prison. I've given Linda a hard time for what she did, but she's still my daughter, so I'm doing my best to support her. I also want to thank you for not physically harming her, even though she deserved it. If you need someone to talk to, give me a call and we'll meet somewhere for a drink. I know you and Linda are finished, but please don't be a stranger. Pop, you don't know how much your words mean to me, and I truly wish I could put it all behind me and regain what we had. But it's still too raw, and I can't think clearly when it comes to Linda. Maybe in a year or two, I may be able to forgive her and we can be friends. But I don't make any promises. Please tell her I love her and that she should move on with her life." That was the last time I spoke to her parents. I returned to work, and life went on. I didn't date. I no longer desired an intimate relationship. When I felt the need, I simply used a high-class agency, but I never saw the same girl twice. I improved my day trading skills and made good money. 2 months later, Colonel Scott, no relation, called me in to explain that our department was expanding. We would be bringing 2 more units online, one based in England, covering Europe, and one in Japan, covering Asia and the Far East. I was offered the job of building the one based in England. It would be a team of 5, comprised of members from France, Germany, Italy, and Britain. I would lead the team, but not participate in the missions. Our point person would be a sergeant from the SAS, and the team would handle planning, reconnaissance, supply, and cyber intelligence. I accepted the job since I had grown somewhat disillusioned with my current position. Plus, there was a pay increase, although without danger pay, the finances would balance out. I accepted the offer as I felt it was time for a fresh start. I would leave at the end of the month. I packed up everything I wanted to take with me and stored the rest. I left the house with mixed feelings, saddened by all the happy memories but also relieved to leave behind the pain. I arrived in England and was greeted by an embassy car. I would be based in London at the embassy with an apartment just outside Chelsea. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a living room. I would be comfortable there. A cleaning service would come twice a week, and a driver/bodyguard would pick me up each morning and drop me off after work. I met the team, and we did our best to get to know each other, despite the distance. I stayed in London, while they were based in the SAS barracks at Hereford. We would communicate primarily by phone. I quickly settled in and started working. I was surprised by the number of calls we received in a year. Our point person had quite the record, and the criminal element was in chaos. This continued for the next 5 years, at which point I found myself missing the weather in the USA. It seemed to rain almost non-stop in England's winters, with droughts in the summers. Who would have thought? I resigned from the firm and returned home, unsure of what to expect. I found a nice 3-bedroom house in a gated community and settled in. I no longer needed to work, but I continued to play the markets, making enough money so that I didn't have to dip into my savings. I dined out most nights and went to the local gym 3 times a week. I attended concerts, plays, and the occasional movie. The last one would change my life. I had just seen the latest Marvel film and was sitting in Kim's diner, enjoying a steak dinner with a drink, when someone sat down across from me. I looked up and nearly choked on my food. There, sitting across from me, was Linda. Oh shoot, just what I needed. I thought I was over her and had embraced the life of a bachelor. And suddenly, there she was, looking as stunning as ever. Well, aren't you at least going to say hello after all these years? My heart was pounding. This woman still affected me more than I wanted to admit. I found that I was happy to see her and realized I no longer held the grudge I had for so long. Hi Linda, you're looking good. That was all I managed to say. And she did look good. She looked more relaxed than I felt, that's for sure. Is that all you've got to say? No. How are you doing? Or it's good to see you? Sorry, but you took me by surprise, and yes, it is good to see you. What are you doing here? I asked as I looked around for a partner/boyfriend. I'm out with a couple of girls from work. We go out once a month for a girl flick and a meal afterward. Look, Barry, we have a lot to talk about, but not here. Call me and we'll meet. Please don't blow me off. It's really important that we talk. Anyway, I must get back to the others, or they will make exaggerated assumptions, if you know what I mean. She took out a business card and wrote her number on the back, and I watched her walk away. Darn, I thought I was over her, and now here I was watching her walk away and thinking about what could have been. Should have been if only she had stayed true. My stomach knotted and I was tempted to tear up the card, but she had seemed so insistent that we meet, so I kept the card. My meal was ruined, so I called for the bill. As I paid it, I saw Linda and her friends look at me and smile. Call me small-minded, but I didn't acknowledge them and just walked out. All the way home I couldn't get her out of my mind if only we hadn't bumped into each other. I didn't sleep well that night and got up early and went to the gym to try and distract myself. It didn't work. She was in my thoughts, so I decided to call her, but not yet. Let her sweat and think I wasn't going to call. I lasted until Thursday and called her. The card said she was the CEO at Benson's now, and I uncharitably thought, who had she pleased for that promotion? I immediately scolded myself for that unworthy thought. I called her number and she answered immediately. Hi Barry. Her voice reminded me how much I missed her cheerful way of answering the phone. I thought you were never going to call. I had my reasons. Look, if you still want to meet, I'm up for it. How about Friday night at that diner? Sorry, Barry, I'm going to dinner at Mom's Friday night. How about we meet for lunch at the diner, say at 2, and take it from there? Okay, see you then. And I hung up. Saturday morning, I did my shopping as usual, but kept thinking about Linda and why she wanted to talk after all this time. I went home and changed into slacks and a polo shirt, not exactly smart, but not too lazy either. I needn't have worried when I got there. She was sitting in a booth in the corner, I suppose for privacy. She was wearing jeans, a t-shirt, and a denim jacket. She stood as I approached, and as I went to shake hands, she pulled me in and gave me a peck on the cheek. I felt a little flutter in my stomach and stepped back to look at her. She was smiling as if she had just won a bet and sat back down. I sat down and stared at the menu, but not seeing anything as my mind was still appreciating that hug. Darn, she could still manipulate me like a violin. I had to take the initiative. So Linda, what is so important? We had to meet and bring all the pain back. Haven't we both suffered enough? I'm sorry if I have caused you to suffer again. It wasn't my intention. You just looked so lost when you came in. I thought you needed me to make you feel better like I used to. Can we order and talk afterward? I'm famished. I've come straight from the gym and didn't bother with breakfast. We ordered bacon waffles and eggs for Linda and a bagel for me, and we both ordered coffee. As we ate, we brought each other up to date on our experiences over the past 5 years. Linda had been promoted to CEO when Ray Barnes left for better opportunities and Ralph Benson went back into semi-retirement. Linda inquired about my past 5 years but understood that I couldn't tell her much as my job was classified. She seemed genuinely interested when I told her I had my trader's license and was doing well. We talked about various things through the dessert, but when that was cleared away and more coffee was brought, Linda's demeanor changed. Barry, the first thing I want to say is I have missed you every single day we were apart, and I never stopped loving you. You should also know I tried for 2 years to find you, but the government wouldn't even acknowledge you worked for them. I stopped looking when 2 men in black suits came to see me and told me to stop as it was a matter of national security. I didn't know what to think. Had I been married to James Bond and didn't know it? Then we bumped into each other and here we are. I need to know if you're still working for the government before I go any further. No, Lynn, I have left that life behind me and now just work for myself as a trader. In that case, there is something you need to know. She took out an envelope from her purse and opened it. She then took out a picture and gave it to me with a smile. It was a picture of a little girl of about 5 looking into the camera and smiling. I could see the resemblance to Linda and looked at her with an eyebrow raised in question. Her name is Sarah Jane Scott, and she is our daughter. Here is the proof. She gave me a birth certificate and 2 pieces of paper. The certificate had me listed as the father and the other pieces of paper were DNA test results proving I was her father. I sat there stunned. Was this some sort of trick to get me back, or was it real? How? When? The last time we were intimate before Clive hurt me. I was feeling ill and being sick every morning leading up to the Christmas party. I thought it was the stress, but after you left I went to the doctor and he told me I was 4 months pregnant. I was frantic. I thought it was Clive's, but I couldn't terminate it just in case it was yours, so I carried it to term. When she was born and I saw her for the first time, I just knew she was ours. So I had a DNA test done, and sure enough, she's your daughter. Barry, I know you always wanted children. Well, now you have one. The decision you have to make is, do you want to be a part of her life, and if so, in what capacity? You have choices. You can be an absent father, a weekend father, or a full-time father. I need to know before I introduce you to her. She will recognize you immediately, as I have our wedding photo on the wall and a picture of us together on the mantle. You see, I never gave up hope that we might someday be together again. If, however, you're not interested in being a father, just walk away and I will never contact you again. The choice is yours. I sat there looking like a complete fool. I was already head over heels for this little girl, and I had yet to meet her. How could I not want to be in her life? She was a part of me, maybe the best part. I looked up at Linda's smiling face and just nodded. I had tears in my eyes and a silly smile on my face. She knew then she had me. The bait was just too tempting. I can see by the look on your face you want to be in her life. We can see in what capacity as we go on. Now finish your coffee and I'll take you home to meet her. The journey to Linda's house was in silence. My mind was racing and bouncing all over the place. When we arrived at a very nice, gated house in an upmarket neighborhood and got out of the car, the front door opened and a little blonde whirlwind launched herself at her mother. Mommy, I missed you. Is this the man in your picture when you got married? Yes, honey, this is your daddy. On hearing myself described as daddy, my heart nearly burst and I had to wipe tears from my eyes. Mommy, why is daddy crying? Is he sad? No, baby. He's just so happy to see you, he can't help it. Now go and say hello and take him inside. She came over to me a bit shyly and took my hand. Hello, my name's Sarah. Would you like to see my room? Mommy said it would be all right, come on. Hello, Sarah, my name's Barry and I would love to see your room. No, silly, your daddy, not Barry. And she led the way, pulling me along. Linda was standing there smiling with tears trickling down her face. Epilogue. Needless to say, Linda and I soon got back together and were married within the year. Sarah was her chief bridesmaid with a little help from Linda's mother, of course. It's now been 2 years I've been a stay-at-home dad, and I love it, although a nanny does most of the work. Linda runs Benson's but will soon have to take maternity leave as she is expecting another little Scott any time now. Am I happy? You bet I am. On a lighter note, 2 deaf men go into a bar. One signs I'll get the drinks and goes to the bar. When he orders and lip reads the bill, he thinks it's really expensive. He asks the bartender why it's so expensive in broken English. The bartender points to the speakers around the room and explains it's because of the music. The man asks, rock and roll? No. Jazz? No. What then? Country and western. Oh. And the man returns to his friend and explains their next drink will be somewhere else. When his friend asks why, he explains about the music and points to the speakers. His friend asks, rock and roll? No. Jazz? No. What then? Some fool from Preston.